new and beginning farmers, engineers, investors, processors. There are so many ways to jump into this food system right now that, and there's a need for that from everyone. So if we can get to a world where working in agriculture is seen as a frontier space, there's exponential growth and financial opportunities here that we are sitting on top of.
All right, Sam, thanks for having me over here to Bloom Farm.
Of course, you're always welcome, Ben.
Yeah.
Honored to be on the podcast.
Yeah, it's been fun getting to know you here over the last 2 years and working together on a couple things. I've been to a couple dinners here at Bloom, which have all been different, unique, but really fun and always delicious food. Celebration of food and community. So just as an intro, we're at Bloom Farm, which is in Ole, Pennsylvania, and you are the owner of Bloom, as well as Third Place Holdings and Third Place Processing. You also serve on the board of the Rodale Institute, and you previously have a history, or a career, I should say, at Google in a leadership role there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm honored that you were willing to sit down and talk, and also excited that there's projects like this in my kind of like neck of the woods, my hometown kind of situation, and it's really cool to see things like this happening. So
thanks for the intro.
Yeah, sure. So let's start maybe chronologically here. How did you end up at Google originally?
For sure. So I actually didn't start my career at Google. I went to university in Pennsylvania, a small school called Bucknell in Lewisburg, PA. And after that, I actually went out to Minneapolis and worked at Target at their headquarters, working in retail. So I bought and sold products for the sporting goods division. That was a really wonderful and inspiring time for me. Number one, I love retail in general. I love some of the foundational skills I learned there. And I certainly wouldn't have been able to take this risk had I not entered into a little bit more of a structured environment than agriculture or even like tech at the time that I left. So I worked in the sporting goods division at Target for about a year and a half. I had a girlfriend at the time who's now my wife, who pretty much was like, hey, I'm in New York, and I think it's probably time for a career change.
For you?
For me,
okay.
She was in
like,
med school at the time.
Nice.
And so I applied to a bunch of different jobs in New York, and was able to get into a round of interviews at Google, and the rest is kind of history from there. I started at Google in the spring of 2011 and did that pretty much up until mid 2023 when I started this. So
what does that look like? Because I feel like most people think, when they think about someone working at Google, they think of either like CEO, high level leadership, or they think about like engineers and programmers.
For sure.
But there's so much else that goes on there.
Yeah.
You weren't doing programming, right?
No, I mean, it's a huge company.
Yeah.
It was a huge company when I started. It's been exponentially larger since I left. I think first and foremost, the opportunity to work at arguably the best and most profitable business in the history of the world is something that, I don't take lightly. And yeah, there's every function in the book, from marketing to HR to accounting to investments to programming or engineering and sales, right? So I started my career in the sales organization at Google. And you could think about that similar to advertising sales, right? We were selling search ads, we were selling YouTube ads, We were selling ads that you would see on an app or your phone if you're browsing a website. And all the measurement that went behind that, right? So
Yeah.
it's probably less like Mad Men advertising and a little bit of a hybrid between being an analyst and being a salesman yourself. I was able to get into that role because of my industry expertise in sporting goods. So I started in the sporting goods space at Google as well, working with brands like Foot Locker, Dick's Sporting Goods, um, Eastern Mountain Sports,
Yeah.
REI, and slowly worked my way through the company doing a number of different functions. One of the great things about working there is it allows you to bet on yourself. It's kind of a safe space to take huge risks and shift functions and
Yeah.
industries and regions without having to jump ship and go to a completely different company. So I started in sales, kind of the lowest position you could think of, faxing invoices to
Okay.
people,
Nice.
and slowly worked my way up into a number of different roles, ranging from product marketing in London to a more mobile development role, right when people were spending a lot more time on their mobile phones, to leading a telecom team of analysts, and then finding my way back into sales as more of a senior leader later on in my career. So that was great. I worked at one company for the better part of 15 years, but ultimately felt like I had 4 or 5 different careers
Yeah.
woven into
Sounds
that.
like it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Keeps it exciting, keeps it interesting probably. But also
Absolutely. Yeah. And
developing a lot of different skills.
developing
I
a lot of
think.
different skills and also seeing an industry shift so drastically. If you think about where things were in 2011 with the internet and advertising, social media, technology to where we are now, it has been pretty seismic. So I feel really lucky that I was able to kind of be in that space at that time.
Yeah.
Similar to how I feel about agriculture now, to be honest. Yeah.
Your career there kind of spanned this really exponential change period in that space.
And I got really lucky with riding a bunch of waves within that, right? So the first one was a shift from traditional advertising to more measurement-based advertising. People not buying billboards and TV spots and buying a term like Nike sneakers if they want to sell Nike sneakers.
Yeah.
That was huge, and maybe the less sexy of all of them, but certainly the reason why Google made so much money in the beginning. The second one was a shift to mobile phones, right? Working in the mobile phone space when everybody started buying a new iPhone or Samsung phone every year was huge. And then the last one was COVID, right? Which was such an accelerant to things like YouTube or video conferencing or a push for people to be more mindful with their ad dollars. This huge push around direct-to-consumer brands. All of that kind of happened while I was in those spaces, which, in many ways was kind of like a roll of the dice bet on yourself type of thing. So it was great to leave that organization with so much experience. I feel really fortunate.
That's cool. I want to come back to that because I want to hear how like the skills, leadership, team building, how that translates to kind of the agricultural space. But 2 questions. What was the catalyst that made you say, I think I'm going to leave the tech industry and go to agriculture? But also, I forgot the other question.
Well, the catalyst.
What was the catalyst?
The big thing was I started having kids. To be honest with you, my dad was an agriculture rep for the United Nations, so I grew up overseas. I have a unmeasurable amount of respect and admiration for the work that he did. And I don't have a ton of core memories with my dad when I was growing up. And after COVID, I moved to Pennsylvania and I was still working in New York. And, this process of being so removed from my family at a time when I really wanted to be a present father really stretched my value system, right? And while being a 25-year-old guy with no kids in Brooklyn felt like a really perfect match for working in the tech industry, trying to be a really present father while commuting on the Amtrak 3 hours a day is just not sustainable. So that maybe opened up a bigger question and problem set in my life around like, what are my value systems? What do I want to instill my kids? What do I want my kids to see me doing? how can I make sure that I don't look back on this section of my life and think, wow, I made a lot of money, but like I don't have any of these intangible
Yeah.
memories. And that cycle was really critical and important for me to push
Mm-hmm.
on. So that was the big change. I would love to say it was like I um, flatlined at the company or got in an
Yeah.
argument with somebody, but really it was like a deeply interpersonal conversation about like what type of
Yeah.
dad do I want to be.
Well, I think that that's more profound than your typical kind of like midlife crisis or professional career burnout or something like that.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, I relate to that. That's, why Kara and I moved home and started farming as well. We weren't so deep into a career path at the time, but I think that there's something unique there that, like, why do you think you were able to have that self-awareness and like you were pretty focused on this professional career, and
Mm.
so many people just have those thoughts or feelings but aren't able to like act and like completely change their lives? I mean, was
Yeah.
it COVID giving you space and time to think, or is that
Hmm.
just kind of like, you seem like you might already have that like self-awareness as a
Yeah.
natural part of you?
I think one of the big parts that shifted my mindset was building a garden in my backyard.
Yeah.
So when I moved to Pennsylvania, I live in Haverford, so about 20 minutes west of Philly. Um, I was spending a lot of time sitting in my office on video conferences, and I
Mm-hmm.
found myself really yearning for being outside. And building that garden allowed me to start working with my hands more.
Yeah.
It allowed me to like confront things that were easy to escape when I was wrapped up in work.
Yeah.
And it gave me a different type of teaching and perspective on how to solve problems. So
Yeah.
maybe a softer approach to like, okay, I'm dealing with this. What's the answer besides putting my head down and hammering through? Allowed me to take a step back and be like, what's making me happy? What are the core principles I'm learning? I think some of the stuff that I picked up at Google, of course, were critical to me making that decision too. Pattern recognition,
Yeah.
systems design, uh, people management, and being a good listener, and a bias for action, frankly, right? Like
Yeah.
when you feel
Be
something, you
decisive.
got to move on it.
Yeah.
And so many people kind of sit in a puddle. So that all really pushed me to a world where I felt like there was no better time than now to pivot. And if I got deeper into that career, both financially and emotionally, it'd be a lot harder to pull myself out
Yeah.
of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So I remember the other question, and that was basically how does agriculture weave its way into that? I mean, you mentioned you were gardening, but it seems like you must have been learning about agriculture for a little while in
Yeah.
order to be like, actually, I'm going to
Yeah.
totally reinvent myself
Rededicate my
as a
life.
farmer and a grower of trees.
For sure. So at the time that I started keeping a garden, I also was voracious in my consumption of content and instruction around this.
Yeah.
Whether it's every YouTube channel that I could possibly get my hands on, every book I could get my hands on, every article. So that was a really impactful time in my life, because we all probably can relate to those moments when feel so passionate about something
Yeah.
and you just can't put the content
You
down.
just have to do it,
You just have
that
to do it. You
thing.
have to learn about it. You have to ask questions about it. And that I hadn't plugged into that feeling in a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I read an article about the Hershey Nursery in Downingtown, which, for I'm sure your audience is familiar with, is a really historic tree farm in Pennsylvania that has some of the healthiest and best nut trees in the world.
Okay.
That was so exciting to me that the place that I lived had something like that, that I really started setting my sights on why Pennsylvania and the Mid-Atlantic were so effective for agroforestry. What about nut trees specifically? Why was I so taken with this story about chestnuts and hickory, and what, like, how could I make sense of the emotion that that article invoked in me? Because anybody who knows anything about the American chestnut, you read a story about that, it's a different thing than learning about lettuce or tomatoes
Mm-hmm.
or market gardening. So that really was, the second catalyst. First was keeping a garden and learning what that feeling was like to work with nature again. And then the second one was learning about Pennsylvania, tree growing, and this Silicon Valley-esque history that our region has in agroforestry. It was just really inspiring to think about,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say Pennsylvania is renowned for oils or wines or even big scale ag, right? We're not a top 3 state in that way, but it is maybe one of the best places to do what we're all trying to do,
Hmm.
which is a more sustainable form of farming, a
Yeah.
more diverse form of farming
Hmm.
too. So yeah, that was really exciting to me. Shelterwood Food Forest is the website that wrote that article. So if anybody wants to
Okay.
read it, it's a pretty iconic
That's cool.
summary of a really historic figure in tree farming.
Okay. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that basically brings me to my next question, which was like trees and chestnut trees. And I was researching a little bit, and chestnut trees, most people probably have not had American chestnuts. They've had Chinese chestnuts. And the bulk by far of the chestnut production globally even is Chinese
Yeah.
chestnuts. Ironically, Chinese chestnut is the cause of why we have no American chestnuts growing, because of the fungal blight that it introduced to North America.
Yeah.
And there are still some chestnuts living in the wild, but only recently has it become possible to cultivate American chestnuts again,
Yeah.
and that's what you're planting.
More or less. I
Yeah.
would say it is still not a economically viable business model to plant pure American chestnut at
Okay.
scale.
Okay.
I don't know if there's enough consistency and reliability in the genetics for people to bet the farm on it.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. What we are planting is a mix of 20 different genetics from 20 different mother
Yeah.
trees
Hmm.
across the world, frankly, that have been really precisely bred and crossbred by who I think is the best tree grower in the country. This guy named Jesse Markson up in at Yellowbud Farm in Vermont. Those trees all have their own story, their own genetics, their
Hmm.
own family lineage. Not some of them are pure American,
Yeah.
some of them are Chinese hybrids, some of
Yeah.
them are Japanese hybrids. I think one of the core principles we work at our company is high density and high diversity.
Yeah.
So being able to spread our bets across a number of different genetics ultimately, is an effective way, I think, to start a tree farm versus maybe a more monocrop type of
Yeah.
experience. Now, why trees? I think the first piece is I was still working a corporate job at the time, and I didn't know anything about farming.
Hmm.
So for me, there was a very approachable idea around a system that you are putting a lot of work in up front, and ultimately over time it becomes a very passive experience.
Yeah.
That felt a lot closer to like building a team,
Yeah.
and my skill set versus a very hands-on iterative process of what most people think of as farming, which is
Hmm.
either high machinery, large scale work, hay, corn, or soy, or it's high labor hand work where you're specializing on a specific market
Yeah.
crop. Trees are a little bit different in the sense that it takes a really long time for them to start bearing any sort of productivity for you, but it is an appreciating asset, right?
Yeah.
It continues to give back every single year in a way that running a corn soy rotation never could. So I really connected to the idea of like, I'm not going to be at my farm all the time. I want to leave something for my kids that feels multi-generational.
Yeah.
I don't want to be at a farmer's market every Wednesday pushing my products. What is the right model of farming for somebody like
Yeah.
me? Which I felt like agroforestry is far and away the most effective. And again, if you're starting to build a team or a community or a farm, I think a keystone species is really critical to that, which I
Yeah.
felt like chestnuts was. It is hard to escape how romantic the story of the American chestnut is.
Hmm.
So again, when you're trying to sell something beyond just the crop itself and you're trying to sell the emotion you get when you're at a farm, I felt like chestnuts were a really good way to tell that story. And then maybe the most important one is it fit all the other boxes within our thesis of where we're trying to invest. First and foremost, weather patterns. This tree is an extremely drought resistant tree once established. Our climate continues to get more and more volatile. Planting something like an apple orchard leaves you susceptible to climate variations that you frankly can't control or insure yourself against ever. As we all saw this year, April week 3, we got one of the worst frosts. And if you're a peach farmer in this area, pretty much punting to next year at that point.
Even the apple orchards are predicting like 70% loss this year.
Yeah. So this is a perfect example of why, a late blooming, a drought resistant tree can be effective there. I think the second one for us is import costs and immigration patterns. We as a society did not grow up with chestnuts because of this pandemic that happened where it wiped all of them out. If you're somebody who is from Turkey or Korea or Spain, chestnuts are a fixture of your childhood and your family. So as we have much more immigration coming from specifically East Asian countries, you are looking at a market that continues to fulfill itself with more people who are looking for a scarce product right now. And then the last thing that I would say is import costs, tariffs, geopolitical dynamics put you in a space where growing something that is over 90% import is I think a much more viable business model than trying to compete with existing domestic product. So, all of those things compounded to us focusing on this keystone species across the 100 acres that are now under management by us in the Ole Valley, and supplementing that with other perennial staple crops like hickory and hazelnut that we're focused on as well.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. It's a compelling story, and I like that. It's refreshing to hear someone changing paths in life, changing careers, and coming to agriculture, but with a very well thought out and very self-aware approach. Like you're saying, I don't want to have to go to the farmers markets. I want to be able to be with my kids. I don't want to have to start over every year like you would be if you're growing annual crops and things. And so there's plenty of people that will be passionate about those things. But you are saying, this is who I am. Let me try and create something that is going to be successful based on who I am and the lifestyle I want to have. And that's honestly the advice that I try to give a lot of new and beginning farmers, to think about what, ultimately you are what is going to sustain this business or not, and being able to have the self-awareness to think about, what do I want to do? Where do I want to be 5 years from now? What kind of lifestyle do I want to have? And then you tailor, because there's a million different ways to farm. There's so many different crops. You could just specialize in bok choy. I don't feel like those kind of things really cross a lot of new and beginning farmers' minds, that you can specialize in one specific thing and do really well. They often, more often than not, think, I need to grow all the vegetables. I need to do a CSA. I need to do a market garden and sell 30 different kinds of produce at the farmer's market. But I think to create a really resilient, long-lasting business that you yourself can have the peace of mind and the focus is to kind of have a simple but dynamic and diverse system that is resilient, but you can focus on just a few things because you are also running a business at the same time. And that can demand just as much of your time and resources as the actual activity of growing something.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's maybe a great segue, well said, to the second part of this business, which is, how are we storytelling with this farm? What are the economically viable ways we can generate cash flow in the 7-year period where we make no money on these trees? So, we're sitting in a historic, I think, one-of-a-kind farmstead that we have spent equally as much time refurbishing as we have refurbishing the soil that was once a corn soy in 2022. That allows us to not only sell a experience with respect to things like photo shoots, dinners, community events, what have you. But we spent a lot of time working with this local township to get approved as a bed and breakfast,
Yeah.
where we can continue to sell a story around immersing yourself in nature, which is really the product we're selling right
Yeah.
now, right? We're, of course, one day we want to be able to sell chestnuts, but our trees are 4 years old. We still have 3 more years before that comes to fruition. And in the interim, it's been overwhelming to see how many people are so desperate to connect to nature
Yeah.
again and to feel something real, that this has been really wonderful to build our brand through consumer-based behavior and activation versus through agriculture to start, which is obviously different than if you went and took a farming 101 class. They would not say start a bed and breakfast in a photo shoot
Yeah.
location. That's the way to make money. It would actually be the opposite. Focus on your craft. The great thing about tree farming is it allows us to have a much more multi-layered approach to our business model than a high labor bok choy only business.
Yeah.
Not only are often we're waiting and we're just examining the trees, which gives us a lot more time to invest in other things, but the other piece of this is that the chestnut orchard can also be used to farm hay as well. That can also be used to run sheep as well. So the ability for that to be a canvas for additional farming activation is something that we're really looking forward to too, and allows us to focus, as you said, but also create more breadth for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. On a previous episode, I sat down with Austin Unruh from Trees for
A
Grazers,
legend.
who I know you know, and we dug into that a little bit. Just it was really fascinating to hear his perspective on layering trees on top of other farm enterprises, and I think that we usually think about trees. If you're going to plant trees, you're like, all right, this is forest now.
Yeah.
You can't do anything else here. But when done right in a silvopasture or like a savanna type ecosystem model, you can layer grass, animals, trees. Like there's so many. You're not actually sacrificing any land. You're just adding a different dynamic to the business stack, and which can produce income, or it can sustain and support the other agricultural activities to have better profit margins.
And oftentimes it can improve your core product too.
Yeah.
Right. When you think about the benefit of shade for livestock,
Yeah.
it is, um, paramount for the health of the animal itself. When you think about why certain animals like pigs in Spain are so nutritious or fat heavy, it's because they are also eating forage that goes beyond the standard slop that we would serve them in the United States.
Yeah.
So whether that's a mulberry diet or a chestnut diet, these trees can also be ever bearing for, if you're a livestock farmer, it might be the most beneficial thing you could do for your product is to plant trees with not that much space invested, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So it's a really compelling model for somebody who comes from a system design or a pattern recognition type of world, who is still very much a novice in the farming space, right? And that, I would say, has been a huge detriment, but also a huge advantage as I come in, is just being crazy enough to try it. Oftentimes in agriculture, I've learned that you can sometimes build yourself out of ideas through repetition and consistency. You callous yourself to what other things you could be doing. Which I certainly had the opposite problem. I think so.
You have lots of ideas.
Yeah, definitely not short on ideas.
Yeah, I think you're getting at one of my other questions, which was, what kind of misconceptions did you have about agriculture coming from a completely different industry?
Yeah.
Obviously, did you learn about agriculture a little bit from your father and his experience when you were younger?
I think the main thing that I learned about agriculture from my dad was the impact it can have on a community.
Yeah.
I don't think it was like next gen science type stuff so much as it was, how do you build a self-sustaining model when you have humans integrated into the problem set, which I think about a lot now, right? I, in many ways, am in a human business just as much as I am in a tree business. I think that, some of the things that I've I thought about going into this. I come from an industry that is very hierarchical, as most corporate environments are. You're not going to talk to the CEO on your lunch break.
Yeah.
You're not in a text message relationship with the VP of engineering. You need to go through the proper communication channels,
Yeah.
and you have a 15-second window. It's often very lopsided in terms of the power dynamics in those conversations. And you go in really not trying to better yourself. You're just trying to make a good impression on somebody.
Yeah.
I thought coming into farming, which from the outside can feel much more cagey, especially in this region, I would say, I thought that I would be running into an even greater problem like that, especially being a young, black, new farmer. I was nervous that there would be a scarcity of mentorship unless I put a lot of time into networking.
Yeah.
What I found was the exact opposite. The best and most historic and legendary farmers are eager to help and share ideas and ask you compelling questions. There is a servant leadership here style in agriculture that I think people don't consider from the outside. It's a much more welcoming space than I ever thought. And I would say, again, my demographic is probably as outsider as you can get. But being in the Ole Valley, an area that was farmed for hundreds of years, an area that was sending cannonballs and food to George Washington at Valley Forge,
Yeah.
to be here and to have these seventh, eighth generation farmers so willing to help and offer advice is, yeah, I mean, it's invaluable, right? And
Yeah.
I definitely thought it would be the opposite.
Yeah, well, you're definitely not doing something that's typical for the area either. So it probably does
Drawing some attention
garner
to
a little bit
myself.
of, some attention. Like, what is that guy doing over there? Like, so with
Yeah.
those trees, and you got some like llamas out there, like
Exactly.
not
But again, everybody can get behind a chestnut tree.
Yeah.
I haven't met one person that's got a contrarian perspective on it. So
Mhm.
even the historic cattle or corn soy farmer are excited and invigorated and want 5 chestnut trees themselves for their backyards. And it's been
Yeah.
a really cool way to build belief in the community.
Yeah, that is a tradition in the kind of PA Dutch agricultural community to have at least 1 or 2 chestnut trees at most farmsteads.
Yeah, exactly.
Every historic older farmstead that I've ever lived at has always had 1 or 2.
Yeah, I love that.
And they're always Chinese chestnuts, of course, but that is feeding into what you're also simultaneously starting with, which is third place processing.
Yeah.
And maybe you could go into that a little bit as far as...
Yeah. So as I started this farm, what I really started was this company called Third Place, which is maybe a term used in the late 80s, early 90s that spoke to some of the degradation in our society by not having a third place besides your home and your work that you could go to and find community. So this business really focuses on investing in sustainable farming systems. We often try to own those outright. There are some of the businesses that we are working on now that we partner with other people or businesses on. This farm was the first and flagship project that we kind of announced. Our second project, which you mentioned, is called Third Place Processing, which is essentially a processing space / incubator for farmers in the Mid-Atlantic that are trying to do something like me, that are pivoting away from a traditional annual market crop and going to a perennial tree crop. This facility has the necessary tooling and equipment to turn those crops into food, which is, quite a tricky and labor-intensive process, whether it's chestnuts and the process around dunking them and curing them, whether it's hickory when you have to crush and cold press them before you can get the golden oil that comes out of these trees, or hazelnuts in both sides. There's a very infrastructure intensive process to get these crops to market and to get somebody like you and I to buy them at the grocery store. That messy middle that we call it exists in all industries in agriculture, whether you're meat or your oil or your flour. there's not enough manufacturing and processing to sustain small farms. That's what creates these conglomerates that make it really hard to compete on price when you get to the grocery store. So we started feeling that as we began to look into this broader community more, as we began to look across the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast around, like, where are we going to get our chestnuts processed? What are we going to do here? That came to fruition around finding this rundown winery that we have since refurbished and are creating the space. So we have been open for about a year now. We have a few key partnerships with various co-ops in the state and mid-Atlantic region, and universities as well. So we feel like this is going to be a huge accelerant to the market. And the next Sam in 3 years who wants to quit their job and start a tree farm, or the next Ben who wants
Yeah.
to move away from a certain type of gardening and plant more trees, feels like they can see what the economic viability of that looks like through the manufacturing in the county. Right? We talk a lot about in our team, we keep the money in the county,
Yeah.
really trying to reinvest in the region that we're in versus people shipping their chestnuts to Tennessee and
Yeah.
ship it back as flour, which feels, not regenerative. So that's been certainly a different style than this place, I think, in terms of the aesthetic of it. But it has been very fast paced in terms of the amount of people that are coming through there that are excited about having something like this in our region.
Yeah, you're recreating a supply chain that can allow farmers to do what they do best.
And we're vertically integrating it for
Mhm.
ourselves, right?
Yeah.
That was the big impetus, is how do we scale and save money while vertically integrating this whole agriculture supply chain for our own farm, and then finding out that there's real
Hmm.
scalability and replicability for other people there too.
Yeah. Yeah. I tasted some of the oils. I don't think that I have ever had hickory oil before from hickory nuts, but that was delicious. The yellow
Yeah,
bud hickory
yeah,
oil, that I don't think that anyone could dislike that.
yeah,
It's not super distinctive and strong like a walnut oil or something. It's a very light, delicious, almost like a very mild olive oil.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Which is
and it tastes
a
great.
heritage crop in our region that has really been forgotten. The idea of a hickory tree, whether it be a shagbark hickory or a yellow bud, there is an abundance of food security that these trees offer us that we have sold ourselves out of as a
Hmm.
society. And it's been really exciting to try to bring something like that back, both on the industry side, but also for consumers. If you want a nice oil in Pennsylvania, that's getting shipped to you.
Yeah.
There
We
is,
can't grow olive
we
trees
can't grow
here.
olives, we can't grow avocados. Your best bet is to grow a bunch of corn, mix it with gasoline, and sell it as canola oil.
Yeah.
If you want something that's native and sustainable as a fat to cook with, hickory and hazelnut, right? Both of these are really our answers in our region. So that's not going to happen unless there are people that are willing to put their money where their mouth is and build the supply chain out, right?
Yeah.
Producers, farmers, grocers, etc. So we're really encouraged about playing a bigger role in this industry beyond just as a farmer, but also as an accelerant for everybody else.
Yeah. So earlier on, you mentioned that you felt like when you joined Google and that industry, you felt like you were at the beginning of a growth period for that industry. And you alluded to that you feel like you might be also joining now this tree nut oil regenerative agricultural industry at a time where it is ripe for growth. Can you expand on that a little bit? And
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's three converging factors. Well, beyond just Pennsylvania is the best, and
okay.
it is Pennsylvania, both from a climate, from a location base in the United States, from an administration willing to invest in farmers, really is a keystone part of this story.
Hmm.
So I feel very fortunate to be in this state and this county of Berks County specifically, which is, from a heritage standpoint, some of the most historic space you can find in the
Hmm.
country. the converging factors that I'm seeing that make me so excited about this is first and foremost consumer behavior. People are a lot more uh, uh, skeptical about what they buy now. COVID certainly put a battery in that.
Yeah.
And now everybody's a lot more mindful about what they're eating and how that affects them. And there's a lot less trust in the food industry than there ever has been before. You see that with products coming out. You see that with price points that people are willing to pay. You see that with a huge increase in interest for things like the Rodale Institute that continues to accelerate in terms of globally people coming to Berks County to learn about healthy food and healthy eating. That trend of consumer behavior, I think we're at the very start of, where people are willing to pay more money to be healthier. And nobody wants to wait for another pandemic to think about how they can live a healthier life.
Hmm.
So that wake up call, I think, is something that I'm very encouraged about to get the price points where they need to be, where farmers can see this as a real viable opportunity. I think the second piece for me is land and trees as an asset class continues to be very compelling for people.
Yeah.
I would say 30% of my conversations about this farm are with family offices looking to invest in a family legacy farm and how they can make passive income off of that versus equity space or any of the other ways that people would invest their money with the government. Crypto has continued to like waffle back and forth. I think people are much more excited about the stability of land as an asset class.
Yeah.
And then, I think the last piece for me is the science behind how we can prove this and the innovation that's happening in this space with people like yourself or Jeff Katz from Rodale really starting to push the boundaries of that. We're getting to a world where um, the people that are coming into agriculture aren't just people whose mom and dad used to farm too.
Hmm.
People who are doing it for true passion and interest that are bringing new ideas. And you're seeing that in every corner of agriculture and food, frankly. So the combination of people becoming more mindful of what they're eating, and trees being more valuable as an investment than they ever have, and then the technology around how we can do this at scale and the talent pool that's coming in, those are, in my opinion, undeniable forces that are happening
Hmm.
right now. Of course, we can look at some of the downside stuff of people continue to get sicker and our economy, frankly, needs small family farms to sustain itself in the next 50 years, or we're degrading soil at a rate that we've never have. Of course, those are important too, but those other three factors that I mentioned, that's why I get up and I'm so excited about doing this, is because I feel like we're at the start of these big waves that we can't even really understand the impact and implications of yet.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't think 60 years ago you and I are sitting here farming. I'm probably some lifelong sales executive,
Hmm.
right? So the amount of people coming in, I think, is probably going to be the biggest change agent too.
Yeah. New and beginning farmers, essentially, or the other piece is encouraging people who may not want to be out in the field working. Maybe they can come work in a processing facility that is empowering farmers, that
Yeah,
is processing tree nuts or planting and managing trees or other perennial crops. There's a lot of agriculture doesn't always have to mean that you're out there in the field sweating, getting dirty every day, fighting against nature. It can be like that. Some of that has to happen, but there's so many other pieces of the agricultural economy that folks can plug into.
absolutely. Not only that, but new and beginning farmers, engineers, investors, processors. There are so many ways to jump into this food system right now that, and there's a need for that from everyone. So if we can get to a world where working in agriculture is seen as a frontier space, there's exponential growth and financial opportunities here that
Yeah.
we are sitting on top of. I don't know if 20 years ago people felt like agriculture and innovation were two things that could sit side by side in the same sentence. I think some of the most powerful innovation, happening right now is happening in agriculture,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's machine learning or uh, bird call identification or drone harvesting technology or seed adjustments, right? These are all things
Genetics.
that
Yeah.
could be transformative as top three innovations in our society over the next 5 years. Um, because, we're in a business that nobody really cares about if the water still flows. Once we stop being able to grow healthy food, there's going to be a need for this a lot more
Yeah.
critically. So yeah, I'm really encouraged about it. I feel like not only purpose in the work that I'm doing, but I feel innovation in the work that I'm doing in a way that I would say I didn't feel when I was working at a frontier tech company for
Yeah.
what it's worth. So
Yeah. I wanted to double click on the one thing that you mentioned about, you said family offices, investment interest in land. That's something that obviously I'm interested in and want to learn more about to try. I mean, obviously, I don't run a family office. I don't have an investment firm at this point, maybe someday, but where is, can you speak a little bit more to the interest that you're seeing? Because farmland is not a traditional investment that is going to be a high annual revenue, high annual return type investment, but there is interest.
So, I don't know if it's always farmland.
Okay.
Sometimes it's just land in
Okay.
general. I do think that um, the stability of acreage as an asset class is continues to outperform anything else that we're seeing, if not just by the anecdotal conversations that I'm having with other people trying to get their money out of those spaces and into a um, financially viable land asset.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the reason I mentioned trees is because that has been a really interesting overlap in a way that people feel like there's passive activity happening. There's obviously, from a tax standpoint, a ton of depreciation you can drive if you're not making money on that product right away. There's often many tax advantages in certain states when you're managing and running a farm.
Mm-hmm.
And if you aren't left in a situation where you have to be picking strawberries for 3 months out of the year, and instead you are planting trees, whether it be for viable crops or fence posts or animal forage, the long-term financial benefits of that are pretty, I would say, pretty compelling, not just for investors, but for families,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this desire to create a food security for your family
Yeah.
or some sort of stability in terms of location for somebody who's got a penthouse in Tribeca, that is worth more than a few basis points on a equities
Mm-hmm.
exchange here and there. So this combination of land and the stability that you get there, the excitement around, wow, I can spend a lot of money up front, plant these trees, and recoup all the benefits long term.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm putting that in a trust for my kids from the jump with
Mm-hmm.
that, instead of owning it myself.
Yeah.
And this other dynamic of like, you will not have to spend as much on annual labor for running something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Those are really interesting for people. I would say the most interesting conversation that I'm having right now sits around lumber
Okay.
and planting locusts
Really?
specifically
Okay.
for fence posts, and the
Mm-hmm.
price around wood being so volatile that 10, 15 acres of black locust for somebody who's looking to invest in something or park their money somewhere is it's much more compelling than it ever used to be. And I
Yeah.
think those rates are only going to go up, whether it's food or fence posts or animal feed. That those prices are continuing to increase, and they're
Mm-hmm.
not being subsidized by the government in the way that
Yeah.
other commodities are.
Yeah. So it's from like an investor or a portfolio standpoint. you have typically you will have a higher risk bucket that you're investing in, and then a lower risk bucket, which is giving you lower returns but has more predictable returns
Yeah,
and lower risk. And so folks are thinking about farmland or just land investing as in that stability, safety kind of bucket of their investment portfolio, and so that there's lower, you have some returns annually from maybe renting it to a farmer, or but you also have long-term appreciation in the value of the land, so that investment is appreciating over time on average. Am
absolutely.
I
And I would
characterizing
say
it?
you have deductions up
Yes.
front as well, right?
Yeah,
That's, I think, the
infrastructure.
other dynamic where
Yeah.
CapEx is a really interesting tool for people trying to estate plan.
And you don't necessarily have that. If you just have an investment in a stock portfolio, you don't have those same kind of tax
Exactly.
vehicles
You don't
to
have the tax
leverage.
vehicles to offset income. You don't have the tax vehicles to offset property
Hmm.
taxes. I think the other piece is not only are you playing with the appreciation for the land itself, but you are also dealing in the appreciation of the product you're growing,
Hmm.
which I think often people see a lot closer to a high risk, high reward experience. So on one hand, you have this very stable land asset, and on the other hand, you have kind of a volatile bet in the type of tree you want to plant.
Hmm.
Uh, Chestnuts are doubling in price per pound over the past 3 years.
Hmm. Oh,
So
really?
a model that says, "Hey, I can plant 10 acres of chestnuts and I can get 5.99 wholesale." All of a sudden, once that number is 10.99 wholesale, the economics of your business model change completely. So there are
Yeah.
rate fluctuations there that allow that to be much more high reward
Yeah.
than when people are just thinking about it as a land bank
Yeah,
itself.
that would be cool if you're having a longer term turnaround of any kind of revenue from a tree or a nut tree. But if in the course of that time, those years transpire, the value of that product increases significantly, you're not losing as much money as if you were planting something that I'm going to plant this and then a couple months later I'm going to harvest it. It feels like a sacrifice to plant a tree and wait 5+ years, but if you're planting it now and the value of the harvest, the future harvest is growing, you're you're making up for that loss of time essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it is a great story to tell until you have bills to pay,
Yeah.
obviously, right?
Which
And that's the
those
hardest part is
you
like,
do have those in the
how do
short
you make
term.
sure that you can stay afloat because the math works out in your favor long term.
Hmm.
It's just how do you keep the short term
Keep the
space
lights on.
there, keep
Yeah.
the lights on in that period. Um, the other thing that I would say is we're working in a space that is extremely weather dependent. So, the stability that you get when you're working in chestnuts or hickory or oak or locust is, yeah, it's unprecedented relative to other dessert crops that people would plant, whether it's an apple or a peach. So, it feels like there's a lot more reliability in that space. And as you said, there's an appreciation on the rates that you can get for these products long term. There's also a lot of businesses now and very smart people that can own the establishment process for you.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times people feel like, wow, Sam hand planted these trees all by himself and he put this fence up,
Yeah.
right? But the
You have a
support
lot of
system there,
calluses.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. These are tree planting hands. But there's again a lot of really smart people that you can call to source the trees, plant the trees, establish the trees, water the trees.
Yeah.
So
And they're experts in
and they're
doing that. So
experts at it, right? So
they are going to do a really good job of
they're
it.
going to do a good job. They're going to get the best genetics for you. They're going to understand the protocol for fertilization. So maybe 5 years, 10 years ago, it felt like you're on your own. Now there is very much a support ecosystem there. So a family office doesn't feel like we got to learn everything we need to know about chestnuts before we
Yeah.
get started. Because once they get planted, you have 7 years to do
Hmm.
as much research as you want
Yeah.
before you start harvesting.
That's what
So
with our hazelnuts. I was like, yeah, this is a great opportunity. We'll plant these hazelnuts. And I'm like, I don't know anything about trees, but I have a couple years to figure it out. So,
for
and
sure.
it seems like it's panning out that way that, we have time
And you have a processing facility to turn it into oil and food when
right,
that time comes,
right
right
down
down
the
the road.
road.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That'll be exciting.
Yeah.
You guys have some hazelnut trees too?
We do, yeah. So we have about 2 acres of hazelnut on the property, and we are working with the Rodale Institute to work through their hazelnuts and process
Okay.
them down the street as well. A
Nice.
lot of excitement from Rutgers in turning some of their discarded hazelnut product into oils.
Hmm.
So, it's been great to see the amount of people, hazelnut, hickory, chestnut, just excited about this space in general and the sustainability it can offer farmers and societies
Yeah.
too, right?
So when can folks expect to get some Bloom Farm nut oils?
We will be
When can they purchase
so
them?
we're recording this in the summer of 2026. September 2026, we will be releasing our first line of nut oils. So that'll be a toasted hickory, regular hickory, a toasted hazelnut, a regular hazelnut, and maybe a sunflower oil. We'll see. So
Nice.
that's going to be great. Those will go to consumers. If you are eating in restaurants in Philadelphia or New York or Lancaster, you may see our oils on the menu. They have already started to make their way to chefs in the region, and that's been fun to see what they have been doing in terms of recipes with those oils
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, I think I saw like a vanilla ice cream with oil
Mm,
drilled on
that would
top.
be good.
I think I saw a pork chop which was finished in our hickory oil. So there's a lot of cool stuff happening by seeding these oils with chefs and tastemakers first before we go to consumers. But yeah, September, bloomfarm.com. You can buy those
Cool.
oils.
And folks can also go in there to check out the bed and breakfast and come for a visit. You
Yeah.
do have open farm days every once
We
in a
have
while.
community days every other Wednesday, so you can sign up and spend the whole day here for free. Um, we normally rent the space out as one large private rental, but every now and then we have teachers coming through or we sell individual rooms and
Yeah.
tickets for that. So,
Like the tea ceremony
yeah,
event
we're
coming
doing
up,
a,
right?
matcha tea ceremony with a master tea individual out of New York. So all of those are things we're continuing to try to do, bring interesting, new, unique mindsets to the farm. And bloomfarm.com will give you access to all the stuff we're doing.
Cool.
And if you want to book it for yourself and your family, it's a great place for reunions.
I will put the link in the show notes.
Love it.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. Great to connect as
Yeah,
always. Yeah.
the
Uh,
rain held up for us,
rain
and
held up. I loved being able to work together over the past years. I've learned a lot and started something great in this county, I think.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool. Appreciate it, man.
thanks.